Hi, my name is Paul Splita. I'm here with Dr. Janie Hinds from Brockport. Title of our podcast is New Directions for Liberal Studies, and what I want to talk to her today about is, as the director of the Liberal Studies, what do we have at Brockport that would allow us to continue our studies after this intro class we're in now, and what kind of directions can we look at?
Okay, those are a lot of questions, and I'll do my best to remember them and answer them in order. What do we have now? The BLS 300 class you're in is Introduction to Liberal Studies, and it is the first course in several that liberal studies students, majors need to take. Obviously, other students can take this class too. You're not a liberal studies major yourself, right?
Yeah.
So we take all comers. I'll tell you just a tiny bit about this program and then move on. It's an interdisciplinary program that allows students to study at a somewhat advanced level across the curriculum. So what's required of students is that they take 2 courses in natural sciences or math, 2 courses in social sciences, and 2 courses in arts and humanities, or arts or humanities, and then requires them to take 2 integrating seminars at the end of their program. All of those courses have to be at the 300 or 400 level. That, incidentally, is what distinguishes it from your basic general education, liberal arts sort of requirements, in that it's at a higher level, right? Gen ed classes in those areas requirements are at the 100 and 200 level. So we're no longer at the introductory level is the point. Now, what is happening, however, is that the liberal studies major hasn't worked out very well. And we know this from long experience. And so as a result, we have changed it. So this semester, spring 2022, is the last semester that anyone could declare a liberal studies major. What they can begin to declare starting in fall, and as of this moment, we have 4 majors declared, is the revised program, integrative studies. So I'll just call it IGS, because that's what what department code is for it, IGS, integrative studies. It's a better name, if I say so myself, because when liberal studies programs first were invented in the 1970s, which was a really long time ago, liberal meant something very different from what it means now. And so, you know, at this point in history, a lot of people think it probably means something like studies of left-leaning politics, but that's not what it means at all. So rather than fight that battle and, you know, educate everyone as to what liberal means, which is really like broad, right? We'll just change the name to something more descriptive, which is integrative studies. Integrative studies, it's an undergraduate major, is similar to the old liberal studies in that it is interdisciplinary. But it is better in that students will take the intro class that you're in. It will be the same class, but it'll just be called IGS 300. After that, they will take 4 courses from across the college in various broad areas, right? And they'll have choices as to what they take there. But then we now have invented 5 courses for students to take to complete the major. And what are those 5 courses? Well, once you take generally 300 level classes across the curriculum, say you take something in math or you take something in English, at the 300 level. And meanwhile, you're taking a social science, say a sociology at the 300 level. Then you can enter the next tier, and this will be 3 integrating seminars that we ourselves offer. This is how it differs from the old major, where we had to depend on other parts of the campus to kind of provide these things. So the 3 integrating seminars do the following. This is very cool, so that's why I'm getting into details. Each of them is a combination of disciplines. Each is interdisciplinary in and of itself. So one will be a subject that combines natural science and humanities, right? How do you do that? Well, we've got a guy in the English department. He will be teaching a course called Literature and Science. So there you are, right? And it looks at the history of science and literature about science. And that will be a really interesting class. Another of the 3 seminars combines humanities and social sciences. So we've got another guy, who will be teaching a course called Music Studies, and it will take a humanities and a social sciences approach. And finally, of the 3 seminars, there will be one that combines social sciences and natural sciences. And we've got someone on board, this will be down the line a bit, to offer something on climate, like climate change, the environment, you know.
Yeah.
And that is just ripe for social science and natural science combo. Now, the other interesting thing about these classes, not only are the subjects interdisciplinary, but the teachers are too. So there will be for each of them a main teacher who does almost all of the teaching. Let's take the example of Dr. Slater, who's going to be doing the literature and science class. Slater will be the teacher of record. He is a literature person. He will bring in 4 or 5 guest instructors throughout the semester, 4 or 5 different times, to address the hard science part of this, right? So they will be from, I don't know, physics, for example, right? Biology, that sort of thing. And all 3 of the required seminar courses have that sort of, I don't want to call it team teaching because it's not really, but the guest teacher part of the program built in. So it's as close to team teaching as we could get approved, let's say. And then majors, the IGS majors will cap off the program with a 2-course capstone experience, one, and these are at the 400 level, right? In which basically across these 2 final courses, they will work on their own independent projects under the auspices of a class and a teacher and all, but the projects will be of their own design. So that is how the new major works. What it does that the old major doesn't do is it insists on interdisciplinary classes rather than taking a smorgasbord and saying, okay, you figure out how they connect. We have 5 courses where we connect the dots.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really interesting. Yeah, that's one of the directions we're taking in this class right now. Our class is focusing on interdisciplinary and what that really means. So we're doing projects like this podcast. We're doing projects like essays, setting up research projects, where we're given a lot of freedom, but still it has to be something that we can determine does connect or does, intertwine, like you said. So giving people a little more of a direction or focus, I think that can be really good for some of the future. So with that type of program, what are these people that are going to be graduating? What do they kind of look for? So obviously you said there's only a few people that have declared it so far for the start of the fall, but do you know what they're interested in?
I don't know the new majors, but I can speak to the what people wanted from the old major,
Yeah,
and then maybe we can talk about the master's program.
yeah,
But the new undergrad major, I believe that it will attract two kinds of people. One will be folks who let's cover the not so attractive part first.
mhm,
Um, One will be the kind of student who is kind of lost. And it's like, yeah, I'm just not sure what I want to do. So I want to go explore and then figure it out
yeah,
as I go. My experience with students who do that is the former liberal studies major, we lose about half of them, which makes sense because they do find their way and then they decide what major they really want to have.
yeah,
But the other kind of student, I think is a strong student, and it's someone who has looked around at the majors that are offered, not just here, but everywhere. You can be a biology major, you can be a math major, you can be a philosophy major. And these incoming students say, I don't see myself doing one of those things.
mm,
I'm interested in a lot of things. And so they come into the program really with an eye toward um, integrating various disciplines for their own purposes. What does that mean for their own purposes? It means they have something that they would like to do with their life. And none of the other majors that are available to them actually offer that. I'll just make an example up right now,
yeah,
looking at my lazy dogs in this room. Animal studies, right? That's one of the fields of research that I've myself been in for about 20 plus years. And so if I look around, let's say I'm 20 years old, and at 20, I was as crazy about animals as I am now. I look around and I say, well, I don't see a major that does everything I want.
mhm,
You know, I could go into biology and go to vet school. But I can't do that because I'm allergic to cats. And that is, I can't do that with my life. Um, so what do I do with this thing I want to do, which is study animals? Well, a legit interdisciplinary field is animal studies, and it combines, as you might guess, history, social history of animals, what have been their role in our lives, and what are their roles in our lives now. History, there's sociology in that, right? What is the human-animal connection? And there is a lot of biology, actually. They're physical beings, and that needs to be paid attention to. So that's the kind of student I'm trying to exemplify, right?
yeah,
It's like, here's this thing I want to do, but there's no slot in the world for it.
mhm,
Um, they're ideal for that.
yeah,
And by the way, that is precisely the kind of student who enters the master's in liberal studies
yeah,
um, program, because they very definitely want something particular to do with their lives.
mhm,
And they're coming back to school. They're not lost, you know, they have direction, and they take hold of the master's program and they make it their own. And they're pretty fantastic.
yeah. I think that's interesting. So I've transferred around a few times before finding Brockport. So that whole path, obviously, some people take a lot longer, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So as we start to talk more about the master's program, you said these are people that have come back and have their path in mind. What kind of the program at Brockport, how would you say, what are most of them as returning students? What kind of paths do they want, or what's their goal really? What do they hope to get out of, coming back to a program like this?
so many things. This is where the world explodes into, all kinds of colors, metaphorically speaking. So I'm thinking about Master's in Liberal Studies students. They are largely returning students, meaning, well, let's say they're master's students. So they're not traditional age, right? Not
Yeah.
the 18 to 22-year-olds. Some do come back immediately, right? They go straight from undergrad, but most have been away doing something already before they come back. And that means they're really seasoned and they really know what they want. I'll give a couple of examples from the program. We do have a significant number of teachers who are coming back. They need a master's degree. I don't know if you know, but in New York, you can begin to teach at the primary, secondary level, up, K through 12, with initial certification. And what that means is they've gone through an undergraduate program to learn how to teach and to learn a subject. But within 5 years' time, they have to get permanent certification by getting a master's degree in something. The Master's in Liberal Studies is an accepted program in New York State for gaining permanent certification. So the way the MA works is that there is a core of classes that are liberal studies classes, and my program, my department, so to speak, offers those classes. They are required, but that's only 4. There are 6 classes of electives, and those electives are created around a programmatic focus, and that's different for every student. If you want to be a physics teacher, you can do that with a master's in liberal studies. How can you do that? By making your programmatic focus physics and taking at least 12 of your elective credits in physics. And then you can become permanently certified, which is pretty cool. So we have a significant number of students in the master's program who are teachers. However, there's another whole population, and they are folks who have found their place in the world and they want to go somewhere with it. Let me give you the example of the dentist.
Yeah.
Right, which should be the least interesting subject we talk about, in my opinion. But I have been taught otherwise by this student who came into the program. He was, when he started the program, a practicing dental surgeon. He was getting a PhD in dental surgery, and at the same time getting this master's in liberal studies. Why? I asked him. Because he wanted to study a particular disease, a dental disease, which I'm sorry, I can't tell you what it's called anymore, and it was very personal to him because this disease ran in his family. And there was really, it's so rare that there are very few, if any, studies done. He wants to be that guy, right, to do those studies. Well, he determined, I think brilliantly, that in order to do a good study, you need to know more than dentistry.
Yeah.
You need to know, you need to have a kind of social awareness that social sciences can give you. How do you construct a study using human subjects, people, in other words? If all you've ever done is dentistry, you don't even know how to construct a study. And the other sides of the program, the arts, the humanities, what are representations of dental disease in the history of art, for example. He turned out to be one of the most driven and interesting students I've come across. because, and it's that kind of personal motivation that really makes the Master's in Liberal Studies unique and attractive to people. My favorite, you're not supposed to have favorites, but I have a favorite former student who is an artist, a mixed media artist, and I've seen some of her work by now. I didn't know her when she came in the program. And she was a practicing artist. She wanted to learn, well, she had a plan to open a space that would be a gallery space, a studio space for other artists to come and rent and have a community, and be a nonprofit. Well, she didn't know how to run a business, naturally.
Of course.
And she didn't know how, the first thing about nonprofit. So she came into the Master's in Liberal Studies program and designed herself that program, right? Taking courses in nonprofit administration, of course, more courses in art. Also, she took some education classes because as someone who was going to be running a studio and a business, she knew she was going to have to be teaching at some level aspiring artists to do better. So there were all these areas that fed into this one thing she wanted to do that was unique to her. And that was a thrill, right? 4.0 student, by the way. So.
I think that's really interesting. The master's program, clearly, obviously, it caters to a different type of student. So one of the biggest things I see is, people at the undergraduate level, even people that are ready to graduate at the undergraduate level, might not know what direction they want to take. So I think it's interesting you mentioned some of the people that look into teaching and how this program does count as certification. Personally, for me, I looked away from teaching because I don't think I'd have the patience to teach at the younger level. But teaching is still a useful skill, and it can reflect in other ways besides, in a classroom. So when you talk about people at the undergraduate level not really having that experience or that interest in coming back because they don't know what they want to do yet, what kind of advice would you have for them if they're really unsure?
Well, I didn't mention a third kind of student that I see, and I really enjoy these students in the Master's in Liberal Studies, and that is, I'm going to call this old-fashioned, but it's only old-fashioned because it's the world has become, or the US has become anyway, a place of late where people go to school with employment in mind.
Yeah.
And that wasn't always the case. And in that way, it's kind of the old-fashioned student. They aren't always old, by the way, but some are. Some are like retired people. Mm-hmm. And they want to learn. That's why they come in. And it's a program that says, I have two right now who say, I don't know what I want my programmatic focus to be. Let me get started. I'm coming back to school. I'm eager to find out now that my kids are grown, for example. And I didn't pay attention to my own interests for a long time. Now I want to go to school and figure out what it is I do have an interest in. So let me just get started, dabble, a little bit. And then during the course of the program, I will find my way. And they will. They will. People who are retooling, one of my students now spent, I think she said, 36 years in corporate America.
Wow.
And she, had enough and said, now I'm going to start over. Right. So even if you are straight out of undergrad school, I think there are folks in the same position. Like, I don't know what I want to do, but this is a good place to land and figure it out. Right.
Yeah.
For you said, for the student, now I'm talking about the program, but I'll come back to your actual question about the student. Let's say, I don't know, some guy named Paul might say, I'm about to graduate and I really don't know what I want to do. Coming into a program that allows a lot of flexibility like ours, I think is a good idea. But honestly, I think another good idea is to take a year off, work, and there is nothing more enlightening about education than working full-time and not going to school.
Yeah.
I've known so many people who come back to school after 1 year. They say 1 year was enough. It was boring. I know I don't want to do that
Hmm.
thing. Now I'm going to figure out what I do want to know. And it kind of lights a fire under them. And anyway, I speak about taking a year off as an old burnout myself because I never took time off. I have never been away from an academic institution since I was 4 years old. And there have been periods of very severe burnout, which if I had just taken a year off, it would have made a difference.
Hmm.
I'm not sure that answers your question.
No, I think that does. I think that's a good point you make too, because that's a kind of a changing viewpoint too. I know personally, if I told my parents a while ago when I looked, right when COVID had started, a lot of people were taking a gap year or taking a year off because that formal learning wasn't working. The whole taking a year off concept, there are people that really enjoy it. And it sounds like you obviously are an advocate for it. And there's a lot of people that would. They don't know or they want that experience. But I also know people that said, if you take a year off, chances are you're not going to get back to it. So it sounds like the experiences you're talking about show that that's really not the case anymore. And you really can get right back into it.
I think, I'm just talking about the students that the people I know, and
Yeah.
naturally the only ones I know are the ones who come back.
Mhm.
I don't know the ones who don't, but I
Mhm.
think that's true. And to be honest, the reason I never took a year off or even, a semester, I was afraid I would be that person who wouldn't go back. So I just gutted it out. But so the story I'm telling you about, going away for a year, working, that's totally other people's stories. I'm
Yeah.
just accepting what they say.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there are folks who never come back. And of course, as an education advocate, I find that a shame. But
Mhm.
I also know that life is very long
Mhm.
and there is always time to start something new.
Yeah. I think that's interesting. I think it's especially with the way the new direction is, there's a lot of things you can do that either don't require, that specific science degree or even a degree of any sort. So those people that don't come back to school, I don't necessarily think that if they had stayed with their program, that might have not been something they like to do anyways. So it really
Right.
kind of shows you that if that's not the direction for you, that's totally fine, which is a point that I think is changing and it's becoming a little more accepted. But to everyone, there's, if you say someone, oh, I didn't finish college or I did this, that kind of, makes them form an opinion about you that might not be true. So I think a program like the one, especially the masters you're talking about, where there's all sorts of different type of people that come into it. I think that's really great. I think that's a good option for anyone that's either not really sure or they just want a new direction. Like my mother, she went back to school. She was really proud of her high school, graduated with the second lowest GPA, but then went back to school at the age of 30, became a nurse. So I mean, that whole actually from Brockport. So there's a lot you can do, especially if you're coming back. So I think that's really interesting. You talked about some of the people that were, spending 20 to 30 years in a field before deciding they wanted something new.
Yeah. And it's not even like they suffered. I talk about the woman who
Yeah.
was in corporate America. My understanding is she loved it for a long time, and then it's a long time, and then it's okay. It's time for
Yeah.
something new. And there's just a lot to be said for that seasoning that life gives you, and so you say, "Oh yeah, now I know, now I
Mhm.
know." But finding your way, and there are those people like myself who just love school, and it's a kind of addiction let me put it a different way. If you really take academics seriously and you like it, if you're not studying, you risk being severely bored because it's constant mental stimulation.
Yeah.
And when that goes away in your life, that's when I think people start craving to go back to school and have that mental stimulation. So, yeah.
I think that's true. I think that's the type of person I'm going to be. I'm going to end up spending a lot more time in school. I just committed to spend 5 more years in graduate school, so clearly I enjoy it a little too much. But I think that's the type of person that they're kind of crazy. They're really going to say, hey, I want to spend more time in this, because then there's other people I know that say, I'm going to graduate, I'm going to go come into my job, this is what I want to do, and I don't want to spend any more time in the classroom. I think the whole pandemic and that kind of stuff has definitely driven some people a little crazy. I mean, there's a time in there when I even thought about taking a year off, since I'm going to graduate online, I'm going to take my classes online. That's tough. So I think this is a really good way for especially more at the undergraduate level now we can get into, where people have the option to branch out what they want to do versus you're being stuck, taking 5 classes in the same discipline. So like, obviously for me, all of my classes are basically in either physics or, the gen eds that I need to take. And unfortunately, some of the gen eds for me, I took them with the mindset of, I just need to get through it. This class is a little different, and it's been really interesting trying to, find ways to make it apply to what I need. So like with this project here, I mean, when we first met last week, we talked about a little introduction and what we kind of wanted to get out of this. And as the director of the program, you said your goal is to kind of market it in a way, but make it seem interesting. I left thinking about that program too. I mean, at this point, I've obviously committed to focusing a little different way. But as someone that wasn't even looking at a program like that, you found a way to really make it interesting to a wide variety of people, and I think that's really good for what you want to try and do.
Well, thank you. That is the idea. And, there's the kind of marketing aspect, which I guess, what I'm doing is recruiting, and I kind of do it in my sleep now. But it also happens to be true that people can come into, at least at the master's level, and really make it their own, design it. I have to ask, what you committed to 5 years in what and where? And this is exciting. This happened since last week.
Yeah, I had been thinking about it for a while. I was deciding between coming back and finishing off a math degree versus graduating, since I will be able to. And after talking to a bunch of different people, the opinion was basically from all of them, if you got into grad school, why are you thinking of delaying it? Because it's crazy. So the program is electrical and computer engineering in Oklahoma. So it's a little more of a technical side, not quite the physics background directly what I have from undergrad, but they look for physics majors because of the way some of the strategies you use to think versus the content, which is, I think, an interesting application, which is kind of the same way as this program. You might not have the, you look at it as if, what skills you need for a job versus what, the degree itself.
Right.
You have the job skills. One of the things we talked about was, now they're called power skills instead of soft skills, things you learn that, it's what people want from a career. You don't really have to have the exact degree or the exact title, but what have you learned? What have you done in school that'll make it really work? So that's kind of why this program worked out for me. And yes, it is 5 years. So it's going to be, I'm hoping the burnout doesn't happen, just since it's something that I'm really interested in doing, which should help. But either way, 5 more years of academics into a career in more academics. So yeah, it sounds like I'm going to be the same type of person that wants to constantly be learning, like you said.
That is fantastic. I have to ask you, and I have a reason for asking, where in Oklahoma? What school?
It's in Norman, Oklahoma, University of Oklahoma.
That was my undergrad school.
Yeah, it's my uncle's a professor there in chemistry, actually. So he played a little bit of the marketing card too. But
oh yeah,
for me, it's going to be a big move. So I spent some time at Canisius in Buffalo, spent a couple weeks at Siena and Albany, and then to Brockport. So really not much out of the Northeast. So the whole tornadoes thing is probably the biggest concern for me, but I think it's going to be a really cool opportunity since it's such a huge school and different than what I'm, used to in any way.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. In my mind, your whatever your undergraduate school is, that becomes the template in your mind for college.
Mm.
That's what college is. So when
Yeah.
you look around the OU campus, to me, that is what a college is.
Mm.
And it was a great experience for me. Don't worry about the tornadoes. They're not as mean as people say. I mean, there are a lot of nasty things to say about tornadoes and yeah, just, take cover. That's all. But chances are really slim that a tornado is going to get you there.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because, the way everyone there is used to seeing them is kind of the way we're used to seeing snow on the roads. Like you look
like,
elsewhere and people panic with a little bit of snow where like, okay, whatever, get out of the way. I'm going to look like that outsider, but that's, I'm going to have 5 years to learn, it sounds like.
You'll adjust. And believe me, that I think you'll enjoy the absence of snow, the relative absence of snow there. But one thing, and I can say this because, I lived many years in Oklahoma. I can call them Okies. We call them Okies on ice. If it does happen to snow, stay off the road because people do not know how to drive when the snow. It's much more dangerous than tornadoes.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that. So I was thinking, Paul, not that I want to, direct your interview here, but something that I did, a couple things I did want to touch on while we talk. Most recent, one of the things you commented on is bringing away those power skills, which you taught me that word. I came up, believing it was soft skills, but as we talked about, I am not a fan of that term. Those are the skills that, in my research into interdisciplinary programs, of course, I needed to look at business reports and, what employer reports, which you can find through states, basically, to answer the question, what do employers want? And, at least three of the top handful of things that employers overwhelmingly say they want is, first of all, good communication skills. And I think that they probably mean both written and verbal. These integrative and liberal studies programs focus a lot on communication. Another thing they want is, I'll use academia speak for it, critical thinking. What that means, I think, in the workplace is an ability to think independently, think differently from the way things have been thought about before. Jobs of all sorts. Most jobs are about problem solving. Here we have a problem. How are we going to solve it? Well, someone who is trained a little bit differently is someone who's going to think about that problem in a different way. You're not going to solve the same biology major over and over and over. You need somebody with a different point of view. I hear my internet is unstable, so I'm going to move a bit. And the other thing that I think we do really well to prepare people for workplace, what is it employers want, is working in teams. It is increasingly the case, especially in the sciences, that the idea of a guy alone in a room with a computer or in a lab alone doing his thing, that's really a thing of the past.
Yeah.
You know, people work together. We don't always like it. We don't like it as students when we have to do group work. We don't like it as employees when we say, oh God, I have to work with them, you know, but that is life, you
Yeah.
know, and so how do you make that work is one
Yeah.
of the things that gets to be practiced among the power skills. Diplomacy is good.
Mhm.
So that was I wanted to address the skills. The other was you had asked me, and we have not talked yet about Delta College.
Yeah.
And a lot of people ask, so in case anyone listens to this podcast, this is for you. How is this different from Delta College? The difference is simple. Delta College is a general education program. It's at the 100 and 200 level. And they may have courses at the 300 level, but it is gen ed, and integrative studies, liberal studies is the next step up. It's the 300 to 400 level, so that you have, you know, expertise. If you do well, you
Yeah.
gain expertise at a more intermediate, if not advanced level of various disciplines, and not just the introductory level.
Yeah.
So that's how we differ from Delta College. Just wanted to put that question to bed.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I spent some time looking at the website before I wrote that question. Because even to me, it was a little bit of a mystery trying to figure out what the difference is or what, you know, the application really was. But I think that makes sense. So you can kind of, it sounds like you can kind of bridge from one to the other is what you're saying.
Yeah, it would be a good bridge. I mean, for me, just selfishly speaking, I think an ideal bridge would be Delta College, integrative studies major, master's in liberal studies.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's a good path too, especially for someone that might not want to know, because like you mentioned, what skills do jobs want? None of those skills mentioned are connected to a specific degree at all.
Right.
None of them come from needing to take specific classes or needing to take a specific department. Those are all just things you learned by putting yourself into those kind of environments that you might not be as comfortable with. Like for me, I've obviously learned material from physics classes, but a lot of the other side of things, you know, the communication, the collaboration, you can learn those better from programs where you're not really as, you know, familiar with the material, because it forces you to understand it in a different way. So I think that's a really interesting connection.
Yes, coming at things from a position of discomfort, really.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I can imagine my greatest fear at this point in my life would be having to take a course in natural science. I mean, physics is kind of interesting, I'll admit, but, you know, I don't naturally think in those terms.
Mhm.
And therefore, it would probably be the very best thing for me,
Mhm.
you know, to get out of those ruts of my usual way, right, of thinking
Yeah.
about things. I'm trying desperately to remember this very funny and I think probably true thing that the department chair of physics said to a list of, you know, chairs and directors. And the subject was something about engineering, right? Engineering schools.
Mhm.
And, you know, folks were making the case that we don't have engineering here at Brockport as a
Yeah.
major. So, you know, what would it mean for someone to, you know, and you obviously made me think of this. What would it mean for someone to want an engineering degree if they're
Mhm.
at Brockport? So the chair of physics comes on the line and says, engineering jobs and engineering schools love physics majors, and we have a physics program. And he said, the old adage is the guy with the engineering degree may get the job first, but the guy with the physics degree gets promoted first. Do
Yep.
you know that old adage?
Yep. He's told us that line exactly. Yep.
It was new to me, and I liked it. I'm like, all right. So it sounds like you're setting yourself up in a pretty sweet
Mhm.
sequence.
Yeah. So there you've plugged the liberal studies program. I'll plug the physics program. They've actually just changed some of their curriculum too to give you a couple more options. So the one that I'm going to be graduating with is a very straightforward. You take all these classes that are offered, and that's what you need. That'll set you up for, anything from teaching at the high school level to a physics PhD, which is way too much for me. But some of the new direction, you're given opportunities to take a slightly wider range of courses, so you can have a little bit more of a specialty, or just, that kind of experience with something that's a little outside the box of traditional physics, whether it be math or engineering type courses. And I think that's also going to help bridge some of that gap between what people want to do if they're not totally sure. You have some options.
Yeah. Well, it's really kind of, I hope you're not insulted by this analogy, but it's like an English degree, which is, my degrees are all in English.
Mm.
And you, of course, go into it because you love it, but there are no jobs out in the world that say English major wanted. Likewise, there are no jobs that say physics major wanted.
Yeah, we
It's
actually
like,
just talked about
okay,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, we had a conference this weekend, and they said, yeah, if you look at LinkedIn or whatever you're searching for jobs, none of them say physicist wanted. They say we want someone that has this skills. So yeah, I mean, that's a good point you make. I mean, I looked at a couple different fields. I looked at something like nursing. I looked at something more related to history. I personally couldn't do it. It was too hard for me. So yeah, I mean, there's whatever the title of the degree is, you're in it because you like it and you enjoy it. That doesn't necessarily mean one is easier or harder than the other. It doesn't necessarily mean one's better than the other. So that's absolutely true.
Yeah, like a very old person in my life said, you used to like to say, easy for you, hard for me, right?
Yeah.
It's, if you like it, it's easy for you.
Yeah.
If you don't like it, it's hard. And that's really kind of a simple formula, I think.
Mm.
So this program at OU, is it a PhD program? Is it an MA
Yeah.
to PhD?
It's a PhD program. So you get your master's after 1 year of the actual coursework, and then it's essentially 4 years of design research that works. So some people take 3 years for that. Some people take upwards of 5 or 6 years for that, because it's not exactly as with any research. You're more likely to just fail repeatedly before you figure something out.
That's what good research is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm suspicious of research that succeeds the first time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I suspect some sleight of hand going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's not bad. I trust that you're getting support, that they've offered you a package, or you wouldn't have committed to 5 years. And that's pretty great. Congratulations. I'm happy for you.
Yeah. It's a very specific direction, though. The guy I'll be working with said that, you're going to come into the lab, you're going to work on, what I'm going to be doing is making fabrication devices in a giant clean room, basically. A clean room that's probably close to the size of Brockport. It's huge. They said, you're going to walk out of lab some days and you're going to say, oh, look at that. It's midnight, just like that. Because, that's what you spend all of your day on. And that's what I want to do. I talk to other people, say, hey, yeah, I'm going to be graduating with a degree in physics. More often than not, they go, ooh, or ow, why would you do that? I mean, that's, I look at it the same way if someone says, oh, I'm at the nursing program. Oh my gosh, I failed anatomy 1. It's not what I like to do. I can't do it. Yeah, it was really bad. I tried it and it went bad.
Oh, I think I told you when we met that I was a journalism major for a year. And that's really what I thought I wanted to do. And frankly, at this point in my life, I think that would be pretty cool, because I have the wisdom now that I didn't then. But I fell asleep in all of my journalism classes, all of them on the first day. And then I just cried. I cried walking across campus there at OU to go change my major to English. And I cried because I thought I'm never going to get a job. But this is what I want to do, and I'll starve, I'll be homeless on the street. And none of that ever happened. But, and the irony is, I don't think it would have been any different with journalism either. I mean, that's, a hard job to break into
Yeah.
at any sustained level. But yeah, we all hit those walls, and it's good to know with Anatomy 1 rather than, I don't know, my experience with math, which is I'm really good at math up to a certain level, up to and through algebra. I like it. It's good. Calculus was like hitting a wall, and that's it. That was all. Yeah, still have no clue. I was happy to make a C and get out of that class. So
I mean,
we are who we are.
I've had classes like that too, where one of the ones we last took with actually Dr. Monnier, who was the chair of our physics program, said, what you're learning in this class, just believe it to be true. Don't try and understand it. Just take it to be true. And sometimes that's easier said than done. But with some of these, that's absolutely true. Just take the course, say, yes, okay, I learned this, and don't ask questions. Which is obviously not really good life advice in general, but in some cases, I've found that to be very much the case.
I'm really glad he does that. That is fascinating, because I didn't tell you this, but I get on straight, I'm a very heavy reader, right? I'm addicted to reading. And I went through a period, I go through streaks of reading certain kinds of things, right? And so I went through a period of about 10 years where I read a lot of what I call physics light. It's like physics for regular people. And it was fascinating. But I remember an experience with one book I was reading, and I think it was by Michio Kaku, if that name means anything to you. It's a popular physics writer. And working through, it was about quantum mechanics, okay? And so I'm doing this. When I finally had this breakthrough, I think it was a breakthrough, so you can check me on this. I thought, all of what we're talking about cannot be seen. Therefore, it may or may not be real. And in fact, everything that I have just learned might actually be a metaphor for something else. But we don't know. So what we have to do is take that leap of faith. That's what Eric Monnier is talking about. You have to take the leap of faith and say, you can't see it. It doesn't make sense. You have a choice. You can believe that it is true in the physical sense, or you're going to fall into the camp of saying, I think that's a metaphor, right?
Yeah.
So I try to believe, but I don't have the basic science to know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I did have a background in that exact class I was describing, quantum mechanics. I started the year off asking some questions, trying to figure it out a little bit more, and it was like running into a wall. It was absolutely useless. I mean, that's the one. If you think you understand quantum mechanics, you don't. Like, you just have to believe it's true. There's people that have spent, their life learning things that you still can't prove, but you just have to trust that someone did it and someone knows what it is. So that extends to any career. Someone else did it before you for a reason.
That's a very wise thing to say, actually, that faith is important. But I'm so glad, you said that about quantum mechanics, because I thought it was just me.
Nope, it's everyone, even if it's me.
That's good, because I'm like, really, this could all be completely made up.
It could.
It could. For all I know, but I have to believe that some people did it, and and that they can do the math, really is where my skills cut out, where you can actually see on paper what you can't see in the physical environment. But it's trippy. I mean, it's pretty mind-blowing. It was fun. And I squirreled off into something else. So I see it's getting on 12:30, and I think our Zoom ends then. I don't know. How did we do? Did we do okay?
Yeah, I think this was great. I think when we first started talking, I had a list of questions that most of them didn't even make any sense. So I think even this kind of way was a much better, introduction to seeing what we kind of offer at Brockport, what you can do with it, and even besides, program specifics, what you really need to do to be successful with anything. And I think that's, whether it's taking a year off, it's looking at other options, there's a lot you can do that doesn't really follow the basic path that everyone's told in high school. Graduate high school, where are you going to college? What are you doing? There's people that are, adults still and don't quite know. So I think it's really the most important thing is there is a path out there, whether or not you know what it is yet.
It is, and it may be a path that you have to invent yourself.
Yeah.
Which might be the best path, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to wish you the very best.
Thank you.
And maybe we'll talk again. I'm not sure, but when you get to Oklahoma, if you think of me, drop me an email, send a picture.